This is a biography of Ada Lovelace. Ada Lovelace was born on December 10th, 1815 in London, England, and she was the daughter of the famous poet Lord Byron and Annabella Milbanke Byron. Shortly after Ada's birth, Lord and Lady Byron were legally separated, and Lord Byron never saw Ada again. Lady Byron was a mathematician, and she raised Ada with a scientific education, which consisted of tutoring by famous mathematicians such as Mary Somerville and Augustus de Morgan. This, however, was not very common education since British mathematics was not progressing. Also, since Ada was a female, this education path was even less common. Ada never received a formal education or a degree beyond her private tutoring, in which she learned algebra, logic, calculus, primarily from De Morgan. Also, Ada was self-educated in some subjects until she met Charles Babbage. When Ada was 17 years old, she attended a party in which she met Charles, who was an inventor and mathematician that was often considered the father of computing. Charles and Ada quickly became friends, and Charles became Ada's mentor. Charles was the first person to create an automatic digital computer called the analytical engine. When the two met, however, this invention was not yet being developed, as a simpler version called the difference engine was only partially completed. Ada was intrigued when Charles showed her the partially completed calculating machine and followed development alongside Charles. The purpose of the difference engine was to generate mathematical tables which would automate the mechanical steps of calculations. This machine, however, was limited in its function as it could only do addition and subtraction to solve polynomials. So instead, Charles began developing the analytical engine, which was a more advanced version of the difference engine that they had previously been working on. This one could do addition, subtraction, but also multiplication and division. The output from this machine would be printed on a page or punched in a card, and the machine would be able to perform multiplication and division. The machine would function based on a set of given conditions, which is known as modern computer science as conditional branching. Charles made his only public presentation of the analytical engine in Italy for a group of mathematicians and engineers. One person in this group was Luigi Federico Menabrea, who would later become Italy's prime minister. At the time, Luigi was a mathematician and published a paper on Charles's presentation, along with additional notes that he received from Charles, entitled The Sketch of the Analytical Engine. During this time, Ada had married William King, who was the Earl of Lovelace. However, Ada and Charles remained friends, and Charles encouraged her to annotate her English translation of Luigi's paper in which she was working on. Her annotations altogether ended up being twice as long as Luigi's original paper. This was her first published paper, and she discussed the programming of the computer with great detail. This would be the only paper of its kind for an entire century. Some of the programming details she elaborated deeply on was the machine's ability to branch based on a given set of conditions, as well as the ability to reuse code. One of the most notable topics discussed on the paper was her explanation of that the machine was not thinking like a human would, which was a common misconception at the time. Instead, she explained that it could do whatever we know how to order it to perform. At the end of Ada's notes, she includes her program that will compute Bernoulli numbers. It is clear that from a letter written from Ada to Charles that it was her idea to use the machine to calculate Bernoulli numbers to demonstrate that the machine could solve a function that had not yet been solved by a human. This program clearly demonstrates the machine's capacity for conditional branching as well as its ability to perform loops. It was far more complex than any program Charles had developed, which is one of the reasons she became known as the first computer programmer. Charles and Ada truly had a partnership-style relationship as they depended on and learned from each other. Charles would explain the inner workings of the analytical engine to Ada, and her insights often surprised Charles. Ada and Charles worked in computing and programming, have built the foundation for what we know as computer science today. Her early programming of the analytical machine established her as the first computer programmer, and this will further be discussed at the National Museum of Computing in Bletchley, England when we go. Ada did not receive any awards during her lifetime for her contributions to the mathematical field. Actually, her work went almost completely unnoticed until the 1950s when her role in the foundation of computer programming was recognized. Despite Ada being a woman, her mother insisted on her receiving a mathematical education, and this was possible due to their social status in the 19th century England, even though it was still extremely uncommon. Although the analytical engine was never fully built, its resemblance and function were incredibly similar to that of the modern day computers, and her contributions to the development of modern day programming have impacted the mathematical field tremendously. Here are my sources. Thank you.